On this exciting episode of Victoire, I have the pleasure of being able to interview one of WCW and WWE's greatest tag team specialists. He is, in fact, a six-time tag team champion in both WCW and the WWE. He is Chuck Palumbo.
Victoire. Sponsored by Desert Golfing Digest, golf information and travel guide of the Coachella Valley, 760-399-6517. And now, on with the show.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Victoire. Today, I have the pleasure of being able to sit down with a former WCW and WWE Tag Team Champion, Mr. Chuck Palumbo. Chuck, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So you, my friend, have a stellar story. I mean, it doesn't just revolve around WWE. It goes way before that. You were in the Navy. You've been on a TV show. You've got your business, your custom motorcycles and cars that you deal with. You've got a gym. You've done so many things in life, my friend. So I think it's a great place to start right at the beginning and share with the audience kind of like, who was Chuck Palumbo as a young boy? What were your aspirations as a kid?
Well, thank you for all the compliments. I appreciate it. Honestly, I grew up in a small town. I went to high school in a town called West Warwick. It's just a little mill town in Rhode Island, suburb of Providence.
Mhm.
Honestly, just I was into sports. Sports were big. The normal kid played, raced BMX.
Yeah.
Played basketball, football, baseball. All the kids in the area, in the town, it was all about sports.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, before we went on air, we were talking, and I was telling you how I'm actually back east today, and I'm going to be visiting with all those same guys. So I stayed close friends with all the guys that I've been friends with since grade school. So yeah, it was all about sports. It was a ethnic town, a lot of Irish, a lot of Italian American, a lot of Portuguese, very proud people, very hard workers, very blue collar, pride of ownership with the homes, nothing fancy. No one had, everyone had blue collar jobs, right? Carpenters and plumbers and landscapers, but everybody was proud of what they had. And yeah, it was a lot about family. Personally, with me, my parents ended up getting divorced when I was 7, so the family got a bit dysfunctional from that point on. I kind of struggled to find myself for a while, but sports was my outlet.
Yeah.
So I ended up excelling in sports, especially basketball, and then eventually get a basketball scholarship down the line.
Yeah.
But the thing was for me is I needed to, in my teen years, I started to struggle. So I needed to kind of get away from the family and kind of go find myself.
Okay.
Honestly, before I left for the Navy, which coming out of high school, I was pretty much, sleeping over friends' houses, and I'd stay in my car here and there when I had to. That's kind of how I was living coming out of high school.
Yeah.
Actually, for a little while, I lived in an apartment with an exchange student from Germany. His parents had rented an apartment for them while they were in the States. His parents went back to Germany. He stayed the rest of the year at the apartment, and so at one point, I was living with another 17-year-old in an apartment. So you can just imagine what we were up to, right? No guidance.
Gosh.
And then once he actually, little story, he actually got deported. He got in a little trouble, kid stuff. But then I was back out, pretty much just sofa surfing and staying in my car when I had to, my truck. And then I got to the point where I wanted to get out to California. I had to do something with my life. I had to get out of that town. So I joined the Navy.
Yeah.
Joined the Navy in 91, went to boot camp in 92 in San Diego. That was the big game changer for me. Because, growing up in New England, I'd never been anywhere. All I knew was the New England area. So getting out to Southern California opened my eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And then just the Navy. I mean, I don't want to sound like a recruiting commercial, but stability, having a little responsibility, obligation, all that stuff, allowed me to grow a bit, and that's where I needed to be.
Yeah.
I needed to structure around some people who had structure.
Yeah.
So yeah, that really opened my eyes. So I did my 4 years in the Navy. I traveled around the world. I worked on the flight deck on the aircraft carrier, the Carl Vinson.
Okay.
I was an aviation structural mechanic. I worked on F/A-18s. I worked on the E-2C Hawkeye. But I continued to play basketball in the Navy. Wasn't mature enough mentally to accept a scholarship coming out of high school, which I was getting offers, but the grades weren't there, and I just wasn't mentally mature enough to get it. So in the Navy, I was playing basketball and I ended up getting recruited out of the Navy, and I got a scholarship out of the Navy.
Yeah.
Basketball, which was kind of odd because here I am, 24 years old, going back to school with a lot of younger guys, right? Especially when it comes to basketball, those guys are all like 18, 19, coming out of high school. But I had an advantage, a mental advantage, right? I'd been around the world as a sailor. I had a little life experience, so college this time was easy.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. And you did graduate, didn't you, Chuck, with a degree?
I actually left a little early.
Okay.
I majored in criminal justice. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I left a little early only because I saw an ad on television for the WCW power plant.
All right. So
That's kind of
were you a fan of wrestling growing up at all? No?
not.
No.
I didn't know anything about it. I tell people this. I knew about Hulk Hogan.
Mhm.
I think everybody did, right?
Yeah.
Um, and then I might have known maybe about Macho Man or something, maybe something like that.
Yeah.
Just because they were like the Slim Jim commercial and things like that. Other than that, I knew nothing about wrestling. And when I saw the ad on television, the light bulb went off. It was more about me to continue to be an athlete and this time get paid.
Yeah. Yeah.
I knew I wasn't going to play in the NBA. I wasn't kidding myself. I was going to end up having to play overseas or something like that. And I don't think I loved the basketball enough to want to go overseas and live just to be able to play the game and make a few bucks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it would have been the route I would have taken if I wanted to continue to play sports as a professional.
Yeah.
So I looked at wrestling and I was like, oh, maybe I can do that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting that there were actual ads on TV because I grew up in the UK, so we wouldn't have seen anything like that. So they actually ran ads back then. Wow.
Brandon, so this is WCW. Ted Turner had the company, and they had a school called the Power Plant. I'm not sure if you're familiar or heard about the Power Plant. And the ad that ran said it was an old school ad. It said, "You want to be a wrestler?" And it said, "Join the WCW Power Plant where the big boys train." And it had a phone number. This is pre-internet, right? So I had a phone number, and I called the phone number. When I finally got through, it was Jody Hamilton. Jody Hamilton is one of the original assassins. Nick Patrick, the referee, is his father.
Okay.
Jody was big in wrestling in the South, was a big part, and then behind the scenes in WCW for a long time. But he ran the school, the power plant. And he pretty much answered the phone and asked me if I was an athlete. I said, yes. I kind of told him, hey, I'm at school, I'm playing basketball. But I said, we're in finals. We're doing final exams right now. I'd like to come try out. So he sent me the tryout dates, and there was one, I believe, in June. So I went down in June and I tried out. I think it was $250 or $300. You had to bring a cashier's check, and there was about 30 people they tried out, and they did that for a period of time, maybe around roughly a year. I'd have to ask, but I think it was roughly a year they did that, and they try out about 30 people a month.
Yeah.
And they would just run they'd run them out of the building.
Yeah.
And take their money,
So it was intense, just as intense as probably the Navy, right?
Yeah, it was. And obviously the Navy's run by the government, so there is some guidelines, but with pro wrestling, they can, there's no
Yeah.
they can do whatever they want.
Yeah.
It's not like you can go to HR and say that they beat me up.
So
not
yeah, no, obviously, I mean, they produce some great athletes through that program. So what was the deal then? So obviously you pay your money, you go and you try out. What was offered to you if you got accepted?
Yeah. So on the ad on TV, it said, make it through the tryout, and there's a chance you could win or receive a six-figure contract.
Okay.
Didn't say how much, just a six-figure contract. And that was like, when you're young and you're a bit naive, you'll tend to try things that you normally wouldn't try, right? I wasn't thinking about a B plan. I wasn't thinking about what happens if, I get hurt. None of these things went through my mind. It was, you're kind of naive. So I saw hey, chance at a six-figure contract, and I went for it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a chance for a six-figure contract. You went through the tryout. It was 3 days long. If you made it to the end, which I did, it was me. I think by the end of the last day, like after lunch, I was the last guy there. And he said, when I made it through the tryout, Jody said, hey, if you want to come back, it'll be $3,000 and we'll train you for 6 months. And there's a chance you might get on TV and get the six-figure contract.
Yeah.
So now I'm like, oh gosh, I got to come up with $3,000. I had no money.
Yeah.
But it worked out. I went back to California. I was at the time, because now we're talking June. School was out, so I was back in San Diego, and saved up the money, borrowed some money. Because not only did I need the $3,000 for the school, I pretty much borrowed that from a few people,
Yeah.
but I also needed money to travel.
Yeah.
I had a 1-year-old daughter and a girlfriend at the time, so money to travel. We have to get set up in some type of hotel or something, right? And
Yeah.
you have a baby, 1-year-old baby, so you gotta have a little bit of security. So I worked all summer, saved up some money, and I want to say maybe 3 or 4 months later, we drove across country from California to Atlanta, and I showed up at the power plant. And I remember the day I showed up at the power plant. It might have been lunchtime or something, and some of the guys were sitting out on the front steps of the school and the front stair area, and a couple of the trainers slash students had remembered me, and they were laughing, like giggling and laughing, and they're like, "You came back? You drove all the way down here?" And I found out quickly that not many guys off the street who went to the power plant actually at that point had graduated and moved on to television and these six-figure contracts. A lot of the guys they had brought in, like the Goldbergs and the guys like that, they were brought in through people that were involved in WCW already, so they were being trained to be prepped for TV.
Wow.
Very rarely, I found out later, very, very rarely did someone who wasn't second generation or someone who had been brought in through some type of connection, knowing someone in the business or whatever it is, very rarely ever did one of those guys ever get to television, get to a contract.
So what's going through your head at that point? Because you've just moved across country, and now all of a sudden they're kind of putting these doubts in your mind. So what's going through your head at that time?
Yeah, well, there's one half of me for a second that got a little nervous, especially like I say, when I pulled up and those guys were kind of giggling and letting me know that no one really ever makes it that way. I got nervous for maybe a second, but then I was like, hey, I'm here. I'm just gonna do it.
Yeah.
Whatever it takes.
Yeah.
So we set up in like a daily rate hotel. I remember it was not the greatest hotel, not in the greatest area, but it was what we could afford at the time, and started training.
Yeah.
My daughter's mother would work. She ended up getting a job as a waitress, and she was working full time. We had one vehicle we shared, and when she wasn't at work, obviously that was when I was home, and I'm sorry, when she was at work, I was home taking care of the baby. When I was at the power plant, she was at home taking care of the baby. At times, this is no exaggeration, we lived on the second story in this apartment, and she'd be coming down the stairs with the baby, handing me the baby because she's going to be late for work, and I'd be coming up the stairs with the keys.
Gosh.
And we would just trade off.
Yeah.
But when you're young and you're excited, you don't think about these things. So we would just trade off, and that's what we did. I remember another day, not to bore you with stories, but I remember Christmas Day, my truck had broke. A head gasket had went on my truck. It was an old K5 Blazer. I remember Christmas Day. It was actually snowing out, and I was in the parking lot at the apartment changing a head gasket on a Chevy truck. Things that we had to do, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Yeah. So basically it was like a full-time occupation for you, the training.
It
So,
had to be. Yeah, you had to be there. I think it was 8 or 9 to 5 Monday through Friday.
gosh, yeah.
Yeah, it was roughly 8 hours a day. Um, Now there was guys that would show up, spend a few hours here, a few hours there, but those guys never made it anywhere. You know, um, the guys like myself who came in off the street, they were really strict with us. They wanted us there 8 or 9 o'clock, out at 5. You know, we got our, it was like a job. We got a little lunch break, and then after 6 months, when I thought I was going to get that contract, um, I got a training contract,
Okay. What's
and
that?
that was, I think that was like 800 to $1,000 a week. Now going from making nothing to making that, I thought I hit the lottery.
Yeah. Yeah.
So now it's actually feasible. Now we can, between what my daughter's mother's making and what I'm making from the school, I can actually train. Now I can start to buy some food. You know, you know what I mean. I can get some rest. I can
I
buy
got
some wrestling.
Yeah, I got to ask Chuck because it sounds such a grueling schedule. Well, first of all, I've got to ask, what did the days consist of? Because we've seen Tough Enough and things like that, but obviously this was WCW. Was it any different? What was your morning to afternoon look like?
Yeah. So it was a lot. It was a lot of drills. It was a lot of conditioning.
Okay.
I mean conditioning. I mean Indian squats or the Japanese style squats. Tons of push-ups, tons of flutter kicks and leg lifts and sit-ups, tons of sprints, tons of running the ring ropes, tons of back bumps. Honestly, looking back, and I would, the amount of actual bumps we took, the back bumps and the flips and the different things we should have been doing. Once we learned how to bump, that should have been it.
Yeah.
But they would incorporate the bumps in the drills.
Gosh.
So it was like almost like football style drills, ground drills that included back bumps. And, your body only has so many bumps in it,
Yeah.
right? As far as the wrestler goes. So looking back, that probably wasn't good, but that's how they did it back then. And also, it was still a weeding out process, right? Even though some of these guys made it through the tryout and now they're in the camp, not all those guys in the camp are going to get picked up.
Right.
So
Right.
it's still a bit of a weeding out process and an attitude check,
Yeah.
things like that.
Yeah.
It's a game, right?
Yeah. Yeah. They're trying to break you.
Yeah.
Uh, but how were you able to? Because obviously, money was tight at the beginning. You're working these hours, 9 to 5. How were you able to maintain what you needed to? Your caloric intake, your physique, things like that. Because that must have been a huge stress to not be able to afford all the protein powders and get in all the
Yep.
food. How were you able to do that? Because you were pretty huge at the time.
Yeah. I mean, we didn't have supplements.
Yeah.
I couldn't afford them at the time. We had real food.
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny because we find out now that all the supplements, I mean, something about supplements, GNC, stuff like that, protein powders, a lot of that stuff is really, we're finding out now that we never really needed it in the first place. Real food's even better.
Yeah. Yeah.
But also at the time I was trying to diet and stay lean. So my diet daily, this is no BS. My diet was 6 times a day, ground turkey. I'd buy a bunch of ground turkey. I became friends with one of the guys at the deli at a local Kroger, which was like a supermarket.
Yeah.
And the guy would sell me the sleeve of ground turkey before it was sliced into the patties.
Okay.
And he'd give me a break on the sleeve. So every week I'd buy this big sleeve. It was long, a few feet of ground turkey, and then I would buy brown rice. And then I bought a George Foreman grill that fit 2 patties on it, or 4 patties. It was a little George Foreman grill. They first came out.
Yeah.
And I brought a rice cooker.
Hmm.
And this is honest God's truth. That was my meal 6 times a day, Monday through Saturday. This is before TV. And on Sundays, me and my little family would go out to a buffet
Yeah.
and eat everything we wanted
Yeah.
once a week, one day a week, one meal. That was the ritual,
Wow.
you
Gosh.
know. But
Yeah. That's intense.
again at the time we were excited, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. You guys were excited. So who was part of your class at that time?
I always tell everybody a great group of guys. Alan Funk, Huey, Alan Funk, do you remember him?
I remember Alan Funk.
Alan Funk, he was a WCW guy. He came up WWF for a little while. But Alan Funk, Mike Sanders, he was one of the Natural Born Thrillers.
Remember him?
Mark,
Sorry, you broke up there, Chuck.
do you remember Mark? He was, Mark Kindrak.
Yeah, Mark
Do you
Jindrak.
remember Mark?
Yep.
Mark Kindrak. Jerry Tooth, the Wall, big guy.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember the wall.
He was
Yeah.
one of my best. He passed away shortly after. Hard Body Harrison, do you remember him?
The name rings a bell.
Yeah,
Oh,
Hard,
okay.
obviously Buddy Lee Parker,
Yeah.
Sarge Trainer, Sonny Siaki, WCW guy.
Maybe I recall. I remember Sonny.
Yeah,
I can't conjure up an image of his face at the moment, but it'll come to me.
yeah. Elix Skipper.
Which one, sorry?
Elix Skipper.
Skipper. Did he go by another name when he made it to TV?
No, I think in WCW he was Elix Skipper. I know after that he did go to TNA for a while, I think.
Okay.
Black guy, super athletic, like cruiserweight
Oh,
almost.
yes, I do remember now. Now it just came back to me. Yeah, I remember him. Yeah.
Um, a guy by the name of Reno, Rick Cornell. He had like a ponytail in the back. He was like bald with like a little
Yes.
tail.
Yeah, I remember Reno. Yeah.
Yeah. Here's the thing with those guys, all of those guys I just mentioned, Johnny the Bull, Stamboli,
Oh, yeah.
all those guys were in the same situation as me, where they had come in off the street.
Yeah.
They weren't second generation. They weren't friends with Sting or Diamond Dallas Page. You know what I mean? They weren't coming in that way. Um, and that's we all had a bond. None of us had any money. We all helped each other out. Someone needed a ride. I remember needing, a babysitter when I was doing an independent show on the weekend, and one of the guys' wives would watch my daughter if need be. Um, we were like a little family.
Yeah.
None of us, I think none of us except for Johnny Stamboli were from Atlanta. We're all from, we all had packed up and moved. So we all, were facing similar challenges, right? Similar adversities.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it just gave us a great bond.
Yeah.
All those guys, just wonderful guys,
Yeah.
great guys. Yeah.
During that time, Chuck, did you ever have any doubts as things were progressing and rolling, 3, 4 months in? Did you ever have any sleepless nights where you were starting to doubt, or was the confidence growing? Were you believing, look, this is going to happen?
So I won't say I was having doubts, but I was like, when is this going to happen? When? And a couple things had happened around that point. Now we're probably at like the 8-month mark, right? And I'm on that training contract, and WCW decided to send me to New Japan Pro Wrestling to get some more experience. At the time, WCW had a deal worked out with New Japan. For instance, a lot of the guys would cross over. One guy in particular there was a guy who played Sting's character over in Japan.
Yeah, I remember.
Remember that? I don't remember his name. He was a nice guy. I met him a few times. He had the face paint the whole 9 yards, and I think Scott Norton was one of those guys who kind of went back and forth. Maybe there's a few guys, but anyway, they sent me over to get some experience. This is before I started any TV or anything in the States, and I was over there, and I was over there for about a month, and I got a call, I think, from maybe Terry Taylor, someone from WCW, who said, "Hey, we're going to bring you back." And I said, "Well, New Japan has been asking me if I have a contract." I told them I didn't. I just had a training contract. They were asking me if I'd like to stay there and work there. So I was at that point. It was almost like maybe I'm going to stay and work for New Japan.
Yeah. Wow.
But WCW said, "Hey, no, hold on. we're going to put you in a, we got plans for you. We're going to bring you back. We're going to give you a regular contract, and we're going to put you in an angle with Lex Luger.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, because you became the main event, didn't you? You were going to be the main event.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. So I might have, the one thing I might have got backwards is I think before I went to New Japan, I did do a couple of Saturday night television TV tapings for WCW. So I have 2 matches under my belt on TV on the WCW Saturday Night Starship show.
Yeah. That was the one in Florida, right? At Disney.
Well, this at this point they were no longer doing the tapings in Disney, but it was that show. Yes. Now
Okay.
they were doing them at local arenas around the country. So I want to say I did. I think I worked. My first one was in Rome, Georgia, at the Civic Center, and they would work the smaller venues.
Yeah. Yeah.
But a funny story on that one, and I think I've told the story before. Before we got these opportunities to work on WCW Saturday Night, we were at the power plant, and Jimmy Hart. Word was Jimmy Hart was looking to bring some of us from the power plant onto that Saturday night show to get us started. At the time, Paul Orndorff was now the trainer at the power plant. There had been a change, and Jody was gone. Some things went down, and Paul had been telling me, "Hey, he knew I had worked on vehicles. He knew I grew up, working on vehicles, and I was a mechanic and stuff." So he told me, "Hey, listen, I can get you on WCW Saturday Night with Jimmy Hart. I can talk to Jimmy. He's my buddy." And in return, he wanted me to work on his vehicles.
Yeah.
So, old school wrestler, they're always pulling some kind of scam or deal,
Yeah.
always taking advantage of the young guys coming in. Anyway, there were days, and the guys at the power plant, we used to laugh. We'd have training at the power plant. Paul would bring a vehicle down to the power plant. He'd have me outside doing work on his vehicles during training at the power plant. Like one day I did a brake job, another day I was, swapping out a carburetor. It was.
Yeah. So hard.
But this is what.
Yeah, what are you gonna do? It's well, I'm certainly you endeared yourself to him and to the others by doing things like that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We
So
were in it.
yeah. So what was it like in Japan? Just touching back on that.
It was fun the first time. I had only been over there prior for the Navy, so I really didn't spend any time there before. This time I got to travel the country a bit on a tour bus, and for me at the time, I'm thinking, well, the matches are much more physical. It was a
Yeah.
little less about entertainment and more about what they call that strong style, where they're trading blows and trading clotheslines. Guys will actually exchange maybe 2 or 3 clotheslines until finally one guy goes down.
Yeah.
Uh, they'll exchange 2 or 3 forearms until one guy takes a bump.
Yeah.
Unlike this, where one shot guy takes a back bump and they go into a spot. Uh, the Japanese strong style at the time was very much tit for tat. It was kind of cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
For me, it was a nice change because starting off as a rookie in pro wrestling in the States, you had to be very careful especially with the veterans, or if the veterans saw you work, you had to be careful because if you came across as stiff or rough, they'd bury you. You get a bad reputation
Yeah. Yeah.
to the point where this is odd, but to the point where in the dressing room, if you shook a guy's hand with a firm grip, something that you're brought up and raised to do, right?
Yeah.
Look a guy in the face and give him a firm handshake like a man would. You did that in the wrestling business at that time, and you squeeze too hard, you get a reputation as being stiff or dangerous.
Wow.
So that was a no-no.
Yeah.
Weird,
Wow.
weird stuff like that.
Yeah.
So when I went to Japan, it was actually good for me because I learned how to be more physical,
Mhm.
more aggressive,
Mhm.
and knowing I wasn't going to offend one of the other wrestlers.
Yeah.
Um, Working every night on the road was good for me. Um, at this point, I didn't know psychology. I mean, I understood why I was doing things, but I wasn't telling a story. It was business to be telling stories. I didn't, we were more demonstrating our athleticism.
Yeah. So what about character and things like that? Was that something that was on your mind about developing? Because you came in at a time when I guess the gimmicks were kind of phasing out, but
Yeah.
the guys were still there that had done the gimmicks. Was that something you thought about creatively? Like what am I when that moment hits, am I gonna create a character or, fill us in on that?
I did at times. We were wondering like, what's going to get us noticed, and what kind of new gimmick can I come up with? I remember on the Independence while I was in Atlanta at the power plant. I remember being like a surfer for a couple months. And trying different things, and we were just trying to get noticed.
Yeah.
We're trying to get noticed and get a spot. That's what the character ideas were about.
Yeah.
It's tough to really develop a character if you really don't have a good grasp on the business. You may think you're developing a character and stuff, but you really have to get a good grasp on the business, not only in the ring, but also the dynamic backstage, the dynamic in the business, how to deal with different people. It's a very interesting business, but it's a weird business. There's a motley bunch of people in that business,
Yeah.
and it's really tough to navigate your way through it in the beginning. You have to be very careful what you say, what you do. There's egos, and it's not all negative, but you know, especially at that time, this is pre-internet.
Mhm.
So being a young guy coming in, the older guys are looking at it like we're going to take their spots.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's a threat there. What's the bet? How can we get rid of these guys? Well, we can bury him. Well, this guy's got a bad attitude because he didn't shake my hand when he came into the locker room.
Mhm.
I remember cases like that where we were so nervous coming into the locker room. You walk in the locker room, there's Hogan,
Yeah.
there's Macho Man, there's Steve McMichael laying on the floor because sleeping because he had been up all night, and you're a kid going, oh shit. So you get scared, you don't want to say anything, so you sit down in the corner with your head down, and then a couple hours later, someone pulls you aside and said, "Hey, what's up with the attitude? You can't introduce yourself in the locker room." Things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And this stuff happened all the time, so you had to. I definitely grew during that time.
Well, yeah, you were in sink or swim mode because when you guys came in, that was the massive push. You guys changed the landscape in WCW. Once
Yeah,
that New Blood thing hit, and I think they kind of played that out on screen with the Millionaires Club and
yeah,
everything else. They really aired out all the dirty laundry. Everything you're
yeah.
talking about backstage played out on screen. So
Sure.
at the time, we're thinking, obviously I was watching at the time. But I'm thinking, okay, well, these guys are all, buddies backstage. But you're saying, no, there was still, yeah, friendly, yes, but there was still this, yeah, we're going to try and bury this guy. We don't want this guy coming up. Um,
Big,
was Vince Russo a big advocate for you guys? Because,
he was, and I can't thank him enough. Vince Russo, I think he's a great guy. Um, he gave us an opportunity, and he wanted to see it change. He was having a hard time dealing with a lot of these veterans.
yeah,
They didn't want to do jobs for the rookies. They didn't want to put rookies over. And I get it. We're new. We're not the greatest workers yet, but we're great athletes, and we look good out there. And if you're a veteran if you're a Steve Regal or something like that who can work, and actually, by the way, Steve Regal was wonderful.
yeah,
He was one of the guys. He was an advocate for us. Wonderful guy. If you have the skills of like a Steve Regal, where you can go out there and, you know, if a guy's got athleticism, you can talk him through a match and make him look good.
yeah,
For the most part, unless you just don't have it.
yeah,
If you're a veteran like that, why don't you go out there and do that?
yeah,
Help these veterans.
yeah,
But again, some veterans felt threatened. I even remember, going to the the hotel bars after the shows. Some of the veterans didn't want to associate with the younger guys, and then eventually the guys like Kevin Nash, Scott Steiner, uh, Rick Steiner, Steve Regal, those guys, started hanging out with us, and then the other guys were like, oh, I guess these guys are okay.
Yeah.
But it took a long time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Well, it must have been a culture shock for them because it was all of a sudden. I do remember that. It was all of a sudden you saw all this new talent coming into WCW. It was like a wave.
it
Um,
was.
so walk us back there. So when the moment it happened, when you knew you were going to be on TV, you got that contract and they were putting you in the angle. What was it like? What were the butterflies like that day? Do you recall
Oh,
that first day?
it almost made me literally nauseous.
Yeah.
I remember knowing the night that I was going to go out and wrestle on TV. Oh, I was just a wreck the whole day. I was a wreck prior to knowing what I was doing because I wanted to know what I was doing. And then once I knew what I was doing, I was just thinking about it the whole afternoon. And until you get out there, I mean, even the walk to the ring. But once you get in the ring and you maybe take that first shot, take that first back bump, then you kind of forget about all that and you kind of start to grasp it. But
Yeah.
it took years to, it's funny is I didn't feel, and I think some of my peers will agree with me, I didn't feel that I started to get into my prime as far as being a sound worker really until a couple of years into WWE. That's when I remember like the last few years, I didn't care what we were doing. I didn't care what I was doing that day. I would just say to myself, I'll figure it out when I get in the ring.
Yeah.
When you get to that point, that's when you're having fun.
Yeah.
And it was almost like a challenge to not know what you're doing and go out there and just make it happen.
Yeah.
Call it out there. Don't know the finish. That's about it. That's
Yeah.
when it becomes really fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you certainly, I mean, you were, I remember the tag team. What was it? Were you the perfect event at one time
With
with
Sean,
John Stasiak? Now you were tag
yeah,
team champions as well in WCW, right?
I think we were. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, twice. So, and then
Yeah.
now, didn't you take it from Totally Buff? Was it Lex Luger or I
Yeah.
think it was, wasn't it? Yeah.
I think that time was with Sean O'Hare,
Okay.
but who did we take him from originally? I don't even remember. It's funny. So for title belts and stuff, I always looked at them. I knew wrestling was a work, right? We know it's a work. I never looked at title belts. I looked at them more as a prop, which they are, right? They're a prop. They help, they help, an individual that they're trying to bring up. But on the other side of it, if they're giving you a title belt, that means they care about you and they think that you know
Yeah.
you're going to be good for business.
Mhm.
So that's how I looked at it. But yeah, to get the belts, real, a year into the business,
Yeah. 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 I mean, that
no,
was something else. I mean, sorry.
yeah, no, I was going to say with really no experience, if you think about it,
Yeah.
no real experience.
Yeah.
We learned, we did some independence prior, but we learned most of our work we learned on television
Mhm.
early on, and then when I got to WWF, they run us ragged with house shows and stuff. So I learned a ton on the road.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, WCW was a great. It's so funny because I remember guys. So because you know some guys from WWF when you're not there. This guy knows this guy, and people talk, and you heard about how great WWF was until I got up there. I was
Mhm.
like, oh, the WCW was as far as the once we started to fit in, the camaraderie started to happen, the schedule, the pay, everything. WCW was way
Yeah.
until they get up there, and Vince would work you to death,
Mhm.
and just and the treatment was so much better at WCW, just across the board.
Yeah. Cool.
I believe it was a way better place to work.
Well, yeah, I heard that as well. I spoke with Buff a few weeks ago, and
Yeah,
he was telling me the same thing. He said, it was a great company to work for. They really took care of you guys. You know, they had the guaranteed contracts, which WWF, I think they started that. Obviously, you know, by the time you got there, it was there.
Yeah.
But yeah, nothing but great things to say. And it was a great product. You know, I myself, once the Attitude Era of WWF started, I switched off. I just went to WCW because I grew up watching it as a family entertainment. And I think when
Yeah.
they started going R-rated, it to me it kind of lost some of the class that it had before. You know, it was
Yeah.
really well put together. But yeah, that was another huge thing that you went through. You just started your career in WCW, and bam, 2001, the company gets bought by WWE. So
Yeah.
what was going through your mind? I mean, did you know you were going to go up there, or was it like this could all be over right now?
Yeah, I didn't know. Honestly, I didn't. There was rumors about all kinds of stuff, but until we were in Panama City, Florida, for the last live Nitro, and Shane McMahon stepped into our locker room, introduced himself, and pretty much told some of us, "Hey, things are going to be fine." Uh, yeah, until that point, I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know if I was going to really have a job after that last Nitro.
Yeah,
And even after Shane came into the locker room, I really didn't know what the guarantees were. I was still under contract. I was still getting paid. Um, at that point, I would just go down and work shows in Tijuana. Myself and Rey Mysterio, a close friend of mine, we both lived close to each other, so we would just go down to TJ. Ray hooked me up with that because he started there,
yeah,
and Ray and I would go down there just to keep the ring rust off us, and we would wrestle on the weekends down in TJ. I would call JR and say, "Hey JR, if it's okay, I'd like to go wrestle this weekend," and I would just keep in touch with him. He said, "Yeah, that's fine." And then eventually they brought like 10 of us up, I think,
yeah, yeah,
roughly, give or take.
yeah,
Now, of course, we were making great money, but we weren't making the money that like Scotty Steiner was making or Kevin Nash or anything like that. So obviously, I get why those guys stayed on their contracts until they ran out.
yeah,
But
yeah,
for us guys, we're making good money, but we were just getting started. We're just getting those big pushes in WCW. We wanted to continue
yeah,
growing,
yeah.
right? So we were anxious to get in there and start working, and that's what happened, you know.
It was about 6 months, right? Because the invasion started in the I think it was late 2001. So you were bought in March of 2001, I think is when that happened. It was
Was it
spring.
March?
Yeah, it was like spring break time. And then yeah, it was later that year. So then when they brought you in, obviously they kept you, I think it was with Sean O'Hare initially. They kept you
Yeah,
with yeah,
yes.
which was a great, I think they could have done a lot more with that, but
Oh,
you
oh
know,
yeah.
you guys were really good, and you were still the natural born thrillers or the thrillers in WWE.
Well, I think we started off as I don't remember, but they kind of kept the same theme going for a while. But they killed us off right away. Typical WWF fashion.
Yeah,
Here's two young guys. Uh, not patting ourselves in the backs, but we were very athletic. I thought we took care of ourselves. We prided ourselves in our athleticism, looking the part, training, staying in shape, good attitudes. Anxious to do whatever, and they killed us off right away. I remember right away. They put us in there with Undertaker and Kane in a steel cage match, and it's funny because I think I used to get a little heat early on in WWF because I would be talking to who I was working with, speaking with them, and I would be wanting to, hey, can we try this? And if I gave you this, maybe you can give me this. I would just suggest stuff, suggest things, but I found out quickly that was a no-no. you know, they pretty much didn't want to hear that. So I remember when I worked with Taker and Kane, it was Sean and I in a steel cage match. I remember for the TV taping, they actually gave us, let us get a lot of our stuff in.
mhm.
So I was excited. I remember they used to air that. I think was it SmackDown on Thursdays maybe? I
Yeah, I
don't
think it was
remember.
Thursday. Yeah, Thursdays. Yeah,
SmackDown cage match. I can't remember. But anyway, I remember it was taped, and I remember I was home a few days later, and I said, "Oh, I want to see our match with Taker and Kane." For us, it was a big deal, right?
yeah,
Two young guys working with two top guys. And I remember I was like, "Oh man, I was able to get the super kick in, and we did this, and Taker gave me this and that." The first time that I ever gigged, Taker did it for me, cut me. I bled. It was the first time. I was all excited. which is that's crazy, right? Excited to bleed, but you know, being young and I want to be part of that business.
Yeah.
Very excited. And I remember going home and I don't know if a couple of friends were over what was happening, but I was very proud of it. I hadn't seen it yet. I'm thinking, oh, you guys got to check this out. And I watched it, and they had cut all that stuff out. Basically, Taker and Kane just almost squashed us.
Yeah.
And that's when a light bulb kind of went on. I go, okay, they're just going to kill us off.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they did. They killed that off. It's too bad because we were again young, green, but excited, enthusiastic, had the right attitudes, and we're proud to be there. So, you know,
Yeah, because you guys had a lot of intensity. I mean, Demolition had a great intensity back in the 80s, Axe and Smash.
sure, yeah,
I think you guys had that intensity, but more like high flying. You guys were able to do a lot of more, high risk moves and things of that nature, but you had that same kind of intensity. And I often wondered when that happened, like why did they do that? However,
yeah,
that led you into an infamous tag team that that
yeah.
really, people still talk about today. And you pulled it off effortlessly. It was great. Billy and Chuck with Rico.
Yeah.
Um,
Thank you. You know, in the beginning, guys were wondering why I would accept that character, why I would agree to do that. Doesn't really matter. People are people. People have their own choice in who they want to be. You can't you playing a character.
yeah,
There's nothing wrong. Today this would be totally normal, right? But back then in '02 or '03, whatever it was, that was cutting edge.
yeah, it
I
was.
mean, Lenny and Lodi did it for a minute in WCW, but to the level that we brought it, it was cutting edge.
Yeah,
So I said to myself, well, if they're gonna make me bleach my hair and they're gonna make me play this outlandish character, I'm gonna play it to the best of my ability.
yeah,
You know what I mean? So and Billy and I, Kip, we spoke about this prior to it. When we found out we were doing it, we both looked at each other and said, "Hey, let's have fun with it." You know. And honestly, it was some of the easiest money I ever made, some of the greatest money I ever made, and some of the easiest money
yeah,
because we didn't have to do a lot as far as killing ourselves. It was more about the antics.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And although we started off as heels, we quickly became faces, and people enjoyed the entertainment because I think they truly believed because they saw it. We were legitimately having fun.
yeah,
And when people see that you're out there being true to yourself, they believe in you.
yeah, yeah,
So we made a lot of people laugh. We laughed at ourselves,
yeah.
and we were successful with it. And if Billy hadn't, Billy got hurt in Canada. We were on a road trip. I want to say with the Guerreros, Eddie Guerrero, wonderful human.
Mhm.
Um, Billy hurt his shoulder. Uh, I want to say tore his rotator cuff tendons, a few of them pretty severely. As a matter of fact, in the match, it was actually dislocated. It was rough. If he hadn't suffered that injury, who knows? I get it. They wanted the characters to kind of peak at the wedding, right? For the ratings week, that was the whole thing. But I believe they could have kept going with those characters, especially as times were starting to change
Yeah.
as far as far as gender topic subjects and things like that. I think they could have. And can you imagine today doing that character?
Yeah, it would. I mean, it was something to talk about. It was entertaining. You guys made it to WrestleMania X8 in Toronto, Skydome. I
Yeah,
think you were tag champions at the time, or you were about to be, because you were
yeah.
tag team champions. I think it was twice again that you were tag team champions. Yeah. And of course, you had Rico. Rico is a great guy. I had him on a few weeks back.
Great.
Fantastic guy. He's telling me about, and again, you being able to be paired with Billy, tag team specialist as well with Smoking Guns. He'd done
Yeah,
Wage Outlaws by that time. DX, he'd already been involved with. So, again, you were definitely christened in WWE pretty quick within that year.
yeah. Um, that's a good point. So Billy Gunn, fantastic worker, just all around fantastic worker. Lots of experience, even at the time. big guys, pretty much the same size guys, right?
Yeah.
Big guy. He could move, had great footwork. See, a lot of people, a lot of the, it's funny because when I look at pro wrestling and I look at the guys doing it, I look at their athleticism. I mean, I look at everything, the character and everything, of course, how they cut promos, the whole 9 yards, but I look at their athleticism, in particular, their footwork, just growing up being an athlete. And like when I saw Billy's footwork,
Sorry, Chuck, you're breaking up a little bit. Yeah, we're having.
and the
Right.
way he was just very economical with his footwork, right? He didn't have to take a lot of extra steps. Like if you see like a CM Punk, sweetheart of a guy, but if you watch CM Punk work,
Yeah.
like, and the way he flowed, I learned so much with. But I watched a lot of his tapes with Scott Hall. He had fantastic footwork towards the later years.
Chuck, are you there? Can you hear me? Chuck. Okay, we're having some technical difficulties here, so bear with us, everybody, while we get this back online. It may be a few moments, but we'll try and get it back here. Okay. Okay, you back, Chuck?
I think so. Think so. Let's see if you there. You are.
Yeah, there you go. It
I
just
don't know.
comes up.
What was the last thing you heard?
So about Scott Hall's footwork.
Okay, so yeah, like another guy who had great footwork, Scott Hall. I didn't really know him that well, but I would watch his because he was a big guy that could move well. He had fluidity, great footwork. Another guy I would watch. So when I got with Billy Gunn and I saw his footwork, and I was going, "Gosh, this is great." So I learned so much just on being efficient with
Yeah,
my footwork. And like I said, I wasn't bagging on CM Punk, but there's a if you take next time you watch him work, if you see how he works, takes a lot of a lot of extra steps. I don't think he ever was an athlete. Do you know what I mean? I think he started off in wrestling.
yeah,
Wonderful guy.
yeah.
I'm not knocking him, but I'm just trying to. These are the things I look at.
Yeah,
You know?
it makes sense. It makes sense. Yeah. And you can
Yeah.
you can tell a lot of the guys that are more, athlete based.
Yeah.
I want to go back to Lex Luger actually, because obviously you were brought in to be the replacement of Lex in WCW. So did you see
Right.
a lot of great footwork with Lex? Because he was a former football player.
What's funny is he looked phenomenal, but and he was a football player, but his footwork wasn't. It's funny because we're talking about footwork. It wasn't great.
Yeah.
Um, but what Lex had is the way he would move, turn his body, twist, show his face,
Yeah.
make himself look larger, the way he presented himself, the way he walked.
Mhm. Yeah.
He's a showman too, right? Um, it's funny because Lex in those days, Lex was incredibly arrogant. It took a long time for him to actually take somewhat of a liking to me. In the beginning, when he found out he was working with me, he would hardly even look at me. I remember at times he would say I was built like a swimmer.
Wow.
Like I know now. I haven't seen him in ages, but from what I've heard, from like Scotty Steiner tells me and stuff, and I've seen some videos. Lex is really done a 180. I guess he's faced some adversity in his life, and I think he woke up. And I heard he's just a wonderful guy now, so I'm happy for him.
He's done a lot of great things. I saw an interview with him the other day. So yeah, a lot of those guys have changed now, Chuck. You find out later, so many things have changed in their life. A lot of them have found faith, and
Yeah,
it's changed them completely, which is extremely inspiring. But let's keep focused on you and your journey right
yeah,
now.
yeah,
So Billy and Chuck. So now that ends that let's quote unquote every pun intended that romance ends and now you're going into the FBI, the
Yeah,
full-blood Italians.
yeah,
So now you talked about Johnny the Bull. You knew him back in the power plant. So now you're going to be back with him again. And was it Nunzio? Nunzio you were with?
yes.
This is a total reversal from the Billy and Chuck character now. Uh,
Right.
did you enjoy this? I mean, was it given to you, or did you get the chance to create it?
So it was pretty much given to us. Now I know there had been an FBI in the past, I guess in ECW. I never watched or anything like that, but I know there had been a prior FBI. This was a new version, obviously a new stable. Nunzio had been in the past ones, I guess, in ECW. I didn't know anything about those. Just what you had told me. But anyway, Stephanie, I had spoke to Stephanie McMahon a few times about it, and she said, "Hey," she asked me what I wanted to do, and I kind of mentioned a character similar to the FBI character. I didn't call it the FBI character, but I mentioned, "Hey, I'd like to be like a character like one of the thugs from my home area, the mafia type, maybe the leg breaker type." I had the accent, I knew the lingo, I knew the words. I could do it. I could do all that. And I believe she might have spoke with Paul Heyman, who was thinking the FBI. And also for me, like you said, it was a complete 180 from doing the Billy and Chuck thing, which was a good thing because at this point, now we're trying to get him to forget about that. Since we're not going to continue that road, we really that's such an extreme character. You need to either continue it or end it,
Right.
like completely forget about it. So that's what we did. We went, the other direction, and I thought it worked out. I actually had a great time doing that character. Wonderful time. We get to work with Brock a lot and Taker a lot and Eddie Guerrero's. We got to work with a lot of top talent, and it was fun to do the characters because they're funny.
Yeah.
They're almost like again they're comical because they're so the typical goombas, the typical Italian East Coast mafia movie type characters, but we obviously uh, added a little comedic twist to it, right? So
Yeah, yeah. No, it was very good, very well done. You guys executed it well, and you changed physically. I remember, I think at the time you bulked up a little bit, you to kind of move away from the Billy and Chuck. You know,
yep.
did that give you? Were you able to be as quick still, or did you find it slowed you down a little bit, or did you want to be more of a power guy for this team?
Um, I was put in the position to be more of a power guy, but also I think it was part of the look. It was easy because I could be a little lazy on the diet, but it was more of that look,
Yeah,
more
yeah,
of like it was more like an old school wrestler look,
yeah, yeah,
like
yeah,
a wrestler,
yeah,
like a pro wrestler.
yeah,
Uh, and also it was an easy excuse, right? Because I didn't have to eat as clean.
yeah, yeah.
But and I was fine with that. I was always comfortable with, how I went out there.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I had a lot of fun with it. Nunzio and Johnny are great guys. Um, and the characters, the FBI was over. Our version of the FBI was over.
Yeah,
We got great responses, but at the time they were making budget cuts, and then I know we had some troublemakers, some producers who were troublemakers behind the scenes, and myself and Johnny especially. Nunzio was, he was a team player. Not that Johnny and myself weren't, but we weren't really the butt kissing kind of guys at all, and we didn't walk on eggshells at this point in our careers. We were more go out there, work hard. We wanted to get better. We had good attitudes, but we didn't kiss the right butt all the time,
okay.
and that affected us. And eventually they banded us. And it's too bad because we were. I thought we were doing well at the time.
Yeah, I think so too. You guys
Yeah.
were entertaining, and everything you guys were putting together was good. And that's kind of so that was around about 2004, 2005, somewhere around there, I want to say. So then there's kind of this period in between, because then you obviously you went away and you came back. You completely changed. You brought in some of your personal life. You mentioned being a mechanic. You love working on custom cars, motorcycles, and things of that nature. So they allowed you to bring that in with you. So what
Yeah.
happened? What was the point when you went away for a while? What was that all about?
I honestly, I don't know, but
Mhm.
my contract just about up, and they decided to release me.
Hmm.
I know the next contract, the money was going to be a lot less.
Mhm.
I was excited about that. Um, I wasn't going to accept that.
Yeah.
Um, like I said, there was some. I know there was a couple people behind the scenes who I weren't happy with something. I don't know, but I'll never really know. So I don't really want to mention names or talk bad about anybody because I really don't know the whole story. I
Yeah.
know from my end, the opportunity wasn't there and the money wasn't going to be there either, and it was time for me to move on.
Yeah.
You know,
So what was that like for you moving on? So did you go and you were working on the independence again, or what were you doing during that time?
so it ended up being a great time. I didn't know what it was going to be, but I knew that I could go to Japan because I knew I had been there in the past with New Japan, like we had spoke about earlier. This time I ended up going to All Japan. But when Japan found out that I was free, they took me right away and they took Johnny right away.
Yeah.
Um, and we were very successful over there. And when I wasn't working in Japan, I was working at CMLL out of Mexico City with Johnny again. Um, and we were doing very well over there. So that could have went on forever, I believe. But at I want to say in 2006, the WWE called me back to come back.
Mhm.
Um, Why it worked out that way, I'm really not sure. We were having great success. Should I have stayed with Japan and Mexico? Who knows what would have happened? Would have
Yeah.
been interesting.
Mhm.
But it was an opportunity to go back. Um, I figured if I can maybe get a singles run, try something different, let me give it a shot. I ended up signing a 2-year contract over there. When I signed the 2-year contract, I pretty much knew in my gut that was probably going to be the end of it for me, unless they been astronomical with me.
Yeah. Yeah. Were you as inspired or motivated when you came back, or were you just kind of,
No, I still was, but the funny thing is they took me back, signed me, started paying me, and sat me home.
oh, yeah.
Sat me home for almost a year. Paid me my full pay. It was easy, and I was
Yeah.
staying in great shape. I was training every day, and I was working in the shop and doing the stuff I like to do, spending time with my daughter. But why did you take me away from what I was doing, pay me to sit home?
Yeah. Plus, you were still in your, well, you still are in your prime now, but I mean, in terms of what they deem athletic prime, you were right there. You were in, what you were you about 35 at the time, 36, somewhere
Yeah,
around.
I think I was right around. Yeah, I think you're right around there.
Yeah. So they,
Yeah.
it doesn't make sense. You definitely, well, it was what it was. You
Yeah.
went around, you got to travel around, you got to do other things that afforded you a great many things. And you mentioned there your shop. So you already had the shop at this time before you went back to WWE?
So what I did was I had converted my garage into a shop.
Okay.
But when I was wrestling, what I would do is now that I was making money, I would buy equipment.
Yeah.
Because prior to wrestling, I had the skills and I worked in shops, but I couldn't afford my own TIG welder or my own lathe or my own milling machine. These items are, $2,500, $3,500, and on up. So I started acquiring equipment, and then I built a little home shop at first while I was still wrestling. And when they did finally, after sitting me home for the year, when they did finally put me on TV, and I had already been building some bikes and I had gotten some magazine exposure, I showed Vince. Vince thought it was great. Vince was the one it was Vince and solely Vince who was behind that whole biker thing.
Okay.
Vince and I spoke about it. He said, let's do it. He was excited. Um, but I looked at it at that point, I looked at it as an advertisement opportunity
Yeah.
because I figured, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I knew they weren't going to put a title belt on me or put me in main event matches. So I was like, let me just start promoting the business now. And
Yeah.
I was very fortunate that guys like Dave Batista, Rey Mysterio, guys like that gave me some of my first jobs as far as building motorcycles for them.
Okay.
So that's
Wow.
also exposure, right? So there's a lot of wonderful talented craftsmen that build cars and motorcycles, houses, you name it. But it's an interesting story when a pro wrestler who's had some exposure on television is doing that.
Yeah.
It makes
Yeah.
fun story. So the magazines, to get a magazine cover as a pro wrestler who's a builder is a little easier than getting a magazine cover as, you know, an exceptional bike builder who doesn't have that, you know, that background.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Because it seems like it was an effortless transition for you. Obviously, when you knew that, when did you officially retire from pro wrestling first, Chuck?
So from the real deal, big time pro wrestling was '08, obviously, when I finished with WWE. But um, after that, there was a few other companies that were offering good money, like in Japan, NWE out of Italy, and then did I go back to Japan? I can't remember. Maybe maybe a little more Mexico. I did a few more shows here and there, few, but that was really it. '08 was really it for me.
Yeah. Okay.
Um, I did a few, but I do remember '09 um, is when I really got deep into the bikes, and I had built this motorcycle that I rode across country for charity and gave away. And I remember at that point, I remember when I started when I did that build for that cross country ride, and I was riding across country. I remember that being my therapy and almost being like my transition. I knew there that I was actually going to close the door of wrestling.
Yeah.
So me personally, in my heart, closing the door with wrestling was probably late '08, early '09.
And that's very admirable. We know so many stories about guys when they can't leave it and they go off the deep end when that part ends. But you knew that you had, and probably maybe the Navy had maybe something to do with that. It helped you train your mind, your body, and everything else. And
Yeah.
very fortunate, blessed that you were able to do that.
Yeah, no, thank you. I appreciate that very much. Those are kind words. And it's funny because at the time I didn't look at it like that. Not that I looked at it in a negative way, but I didn't realize at the time. I didn't think to realize. I should have seen this, but I didn't think to realize most of these guys who are successful pro wrestlers who end up getting out and it all falls apart, like you said, most of these guys, that's all they've ever done.
Yeah.
That's all they were fans when they were kids for the most part. They may be second generation, maybe not. They started when they were in their late teens. They finally made it. That's all they know. So, like you said, the Navy, but I had grown up. I had been swinging a hammer and spinning wrenches since I was 7 or 8 years old.
Right. Right.
My dad was a carpenter. I used to work on construction sites, maybe even 6 or 7, just as a little helper.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I already knew how to drive. I know how to properly swing a hammer when I was at 6, 7. So, and I was doing mechanic work by the time I was 10. I'm not bragging. I'm just saying those life experiences, and then the Navy and being the mechanic in the Navy and even college, coming into the business a little later at 27, having that life experience, I didn't realize I was head and shoulders above the game.
Yeah. Yeah. You
I didn't
really.
really realize. I was just thinking, I don't know enough about wrestling. I wasn't a second generation. I wasn't, I didn't watch wrestling. I'm behind the curve. But in all actuality, I found out pretty quickly that, maybe I wasn't. Maybe I was actually ahead of the game with that life experience.
Oh, I definitely think so. I mean, even talking back to your to Rico. Rico was the same thing. What I
Yeah.
garnered from that interview was that with that extra life experience he had prior to entering, it was
Yeah.
easy for him to transition after because he was already an adult and
Yes.
he experienced life. And like you were saying, some of the younger guys, they don't experience anything in life and they just come in, they're given everything. That's all they know. And it's, like I said, sometimes it's unfortunate, but you, like I said, that story with your motorcycle, tell us a little bit about that. Cause that was for veterans, right? You built a motorcycle. You,
Yeah. So the inspiration behind, well, first of all, all that adrenaline rush that you have when you're actually out there wrestling, but the fact that you are a wrestler and you're on television, there's a rush that you have within you daily, just knowing that you're out there doing that. Any wrestler will tell you that, maybe not in those words, it's hard to explain, but there's a natural high that you are on when you are a pro wrestler with a major company on television. when that ends, there's like a crash, right? I wasn't like depressed or anything like that, but I was thinking to myself, I got to go out there and do this again with something else. I got to do something meaningful.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it just so happened at the time, my brother, who was actually, him and I started in the Navy together. When I went to college after the Navy on the basketball scholarship, he went to the warrant officer program in the Army where they were taking enlisted guys from the Navy who did not have 4-year degrees, and they were allowing them to become officers in the Army to fly helicopters. They needed helicopter pilots. This is just around the end of Desert Storm. So back to my brother, he was my inspiration. He was over in Afghanistan, and his chopper had taken like 76 to 79 bullets. His chopper, he had been attacked, and he disobeyed a direct command and went in and saved men who they were going to leave. His superiors told him to turn around. He actually, on the radio, I heard the radio transaction later. We got a copy of it. My brother told him to F off. I'm going in to get my guys. He takes 79 bullets, survives, rescues the men, takes them back to the base in Afghanistan on one engine. So when I heard that story, I became not only emotional, but I became very re-inspired. Mm-hmm. So I said, I got to do something. My brother's out there saving lives, you know? So I went to Walter Reed Hospital in Washington, D.C. I went to visit some of these soldiers that were coming back with injuries and stuff like that, just to kind of wrap my head around this. And then through speaking with some of those kids, I call them kids, they were young kids, great attitudes, kids that, you know, came back, and I hate to say this is graphic, but maybe missing a limb or having a type of brain damage, thinking that they're going to heal up and get back there with their brothers and go back. Yeah. You know, this is the kind of drive and heart these kids have. But anyway, I was so inspired by that too. I said, let me use some of my talent. Let me build a motorcycle, and we'll find an organization that we can donate to that raises money for these veterans coming back to assist in maybe their new living conditions, maybe a wheelchair ramp, or maybe widening a doorway, or maybe having a seat installed in a shower, you know, things that these guys are now going to need. And I found an organization called Fueled by the Fallen who was willing to take our money. I didn't realize how it is with some of these charities to make this all happen. So I got together with some of other people I knew in the motorcycle industry, parts makers, manufacturers, and such, and material supply companies. And I was able to get a bunch of us to donate money to build this motorcycle. I built the motorcycle myself I still had the home shop at the time, built the motorcycle with the help of all these guys donating things. Painted, by the time I wrapped it up, it was painted, ready to go. And I rode it across country. I set up a tour, knowing the country pretty well from all the years of traveling as a wrestler. I was able to set up a little tour. And not to get off track, but I was also playing in a rock and roll band at the time, a cover band. And I decided, like, on this tour, the band's gonna play once in a while, and we're gonna do these little shows, like little like bike nights, at say like a Hooters bike night. The parking lot, the band set up on stage. You got the motorcycle. We're selling raffle tickets.
Right. Okay.
That was that.
Yeah.
And we did that across the country for a week as we rode these motorcycles. The one I built, rode it across the country. My band followed. A few of my buddies rode with me, and we stopped and did these little spot shows. Bike night here, Harley Davidson dealership this night, an afternoon at a motorcycle museum. You know, it was great. And then when we got to Rockingham, North Carolina, which was the final event, we kind of piggybacked with a chopper magazine. I used to write technical articles for a chopper magazine. Okay. It was called The Horse Backstreet Choppers, and they have an annual event at Rockingham Speedway. And the final day of the giveaway was a Saturday of that weekend, and we gave away the bike in front of 10,000 people. And it just so happened that the raffle winner, because we had sold tickets online also through the website that I had put up the time for it. We sold raffle tickets that final weekend, and a gentleman, a veteran from West Virginia, who rode down on his motorcycle and broke down and had to hitch a ride to the show, bought a raffle ticket, and he won the bike at the show.
Wow.
And I have all that on film. Eventually, I'll put the documentary together, but I have all that in on a hard drive. We documented it. I had a cameraman the whole time.
Yeah.
And it was an incredible experience. And I don't want to bore you with it too much, but
It's just,
I had wrote technical articles in that magazine, like I said, but I also had mentioned this thing, that this adventure we're going to do. So we had a handful of guys from around the country who either rode out or flew their motorcycles out and started the trip with me in
okay.
San Diego,
Right.
which was wonderful, right? To have that type of support. And then as we would go from city to city, people would join us, and maybe other people would leave. They have to go back home, go back to work. At times, we had close to 100 people riding with us at one time.
Yeah.
So people would start with us in Texas and say, "Hey, Chuck, I could ride for a few days. Maybe I can make it to wherever, Alabama."
Mm.
They ride for a few days and turn around. So it was a wonderful. I didn't realize the impact that it was happening.
Yeah. That's pretty big. That's a pretty big impact.
It was really touching for me, honestly, man. It was really touching and emotional for me, and I was on one of those natural highs again,
Yeah.
like I was missing.
Yeah.
Anyway, met some great friends who I'm still in contact with to this day, and yeah, we gave the bike away, raised a bunch of money,
Yeah.
and I felt like I did my part.
Well, you definitely did. I mean, that's an incredible story. I mean, you can say one thing to, get a crowd excited. It's another thing when you're donating your time to a cause like that and you're inspiring people across the entire country and you're doing it for
Yeah,
the veterans. I mean, that's something to be said. That's one thing that, obviously being in the public eye, it gives you that ability to be able to reach out and really inspire and encourage people in their day-to-day lives. It's
right.
their opportunity that you get to do that. So, I mean, that story, yeah, it's a very encouraging story. We'd love to see, yeah, get the documentary together and get it out there, man. That would,
It's funny you mentioned that because I haven't thought about it in a while. It's nice that we're talking about it now because it brings back memories, but it also kind of gets me thinking, hey, maybe I should start editing this
yeah,
and put it together, you
yeah,
know?
yeah, I
So
think so. Yeah, I think so, definitely. I mean, we could do with more encouraging stories like that, where
yeah,
people, especially people that were in the public that can give back and they do things from the heart. It's not necessary, it's not inspired by a paycheck. So, yeah, I mean, an incredible story.
it feels good, from a selfish standpoint, it feels great.
Yeah,
It really does to be able to do that.
yeah,
So there's my reward,
yeah.
and then if we inspire a few people along the way
Mhm.
and touch a few people, then hey, we did our job.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it's all about.
Yeah.
Um, so did that lead you, sorry to jump to the next, but did that lead you onto the show for Discovery Channel?
Well, kind of in a way. So I finished that tour, right, giving the motorcycle away. I had such a great time. Obviously, I can't afford to give motorcycles away every year, but the following year, I decided I'm going to be a little rock and roll guy, and I'm going to take my rock band, and we're going to tour the country as a rock band. So,
Yeah,
so the following year, we took a similar route, and we went all the way across the country to the Carolinas and all the way up to New England, my home, or my original home, and then we came across the I-70 on the way back, and then back down to San Diego through Arizona. But anyway, stopped with the band and did a bunch of shows at bars, and it was a wonderful time. We rode motorcycles every day, and the band followed.
yeah,
A couple of guys in the band rode motorcycles, and a couple of my friends followed us, and we had just a great time playing at biker bars, and it was wonderful.
yeah,
So I did that the following year, but then I decided to get my own commercial space and get the shop built out, and I pretty much got into building bikes just full time. So I was doing that, and at the same time, I had a little. I don't have it anymore, but I had a little gym going next door to my shop, like a little garage style gym. Nothing fancy, but for the locals, they loved it.
Mhm.
Small, not a bunch of clients, but I got to work in it there a little bit. There was another trainer there. So when I wasn't working at the shop, I'd be over there maybe and go back and forth. It was right next door, same building.
Yeah.
Um, One day, this is God, I'm trying to think what year it is now. Was it 10 or 11? Might have been 10, 11. So one day I get a DM on Twitter, I believe it was at the time, from a producer from Discovery Channel, and saying they were interested in possibly doing something with me. We heard you also build motorcycles. Besides being a wrestler, we heard you are into cars and motorcycles and stuff. And I kind of was like, I didn't really take it seriously, honestly. I didn't have an attitude. I was just like, I was skeptical.
Yeah.
So I kind of blew it off.
Hmm.
I remember in the DMs, it got to the point where they said, "Hey, well, we're in London right now, but when we get back, we'll come see you." So I was like, "Okay."
Yeah.
Well, like 10 days later, they showed up at my shop unannounced, and when they looked at my shop, they were like, "Oh, we thought you would like one of those guys who's like maybe a wrestler who's into cars, like like Steve Austin, or like Goldberg, those guys. They're like into cars, but they don't really know how. They don't work on them."
Right.
They thought I was one of those guys, and I was just going to be like a host or something. They're like, but you actually do the work. I said, yeah. Well, who else is going to do
Yeah.
it? They found that really impressive, and it all of a sudden the light bulb went on for them. Is what they told me, and they said we have a couple ideas, and which eventually we eventually led to the show.
Yeah.
Um, and the concept behind the show was we worked with legitimate people who hoarded classic cars.
Mhm.
Yeah, the proposition was we'll build you one of our six-figure cars, complete restoration, your choice of what car out of your hoard. But the deal is, in order to fund this car and pay for it, you're going to have to sell off some of your existing hoard
Yeah.
to pay us to do your car.
Mhm.
We'd assist in the selling of the other vehicles. And that's how it worked.
Yeah.
So we did a season called, the first season was called Lords of the Car Hordes, a little long of a name.
Mhm.
They renamed the second year and called it Rusted Development.
Okay.
Um, Successful show.
Yeah.
Helped a lot of people, again, these hoarders and stuff like that. Now, obviously, you have to add some drama to it, but for the most part, these were legitimate hoarders. Um, and then the second season, it came off very well. Built all the cars ourselves. We didn't have any off-camera time where we had people helping us. These are all our guys building our cars. Very proud of that. Um, and then, yeah, they told us, it'll be airing. This is going to be one of the first shows that airs worldwide in
Mhm.
different countries. They still air today, matter of fact, in different platforms. But yeah, great experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I will say this: very taxing. Trying to do my own builds that I already had existing, and then trying to do the show. You're talking about 18-hour days.
Mhm.
Uh, you know,
Yeah.
and it's exhausting. TV's not everything you think it is, but a great experience. And also, it was another platform for me. It was almost like a WWE platform where, I'm a Discovery Channel getting this exposure. It just helps me with what I'm doing.
Yeah. It continues to give you that free exposure, paid exposure, actually. So, get paid
Yeah.
to market. So, no, that's good. So a couple years into that. So today you're still working on your motorcycles. You're still fully engrossed in that. Are you
Well,
doing it? Or
well, I just want to say I'd be lying if I say I'm fully engrossed now, because now I'm pretty much a part timer. I'm
okay,
at the point in my life now where pretty much retired, and what I'm doing is I got a build going on right now for a motorcycle, and I'm doing some restorations on some trucks. I'll build a lot of stuff for myself, and then eventually sell it. But right now, I'm just starting to get back I just recently I'm finishing up a home I restored that I live in, and so I took a lot of time off to do that. And then I built a new shop on
Okay.
my property, so I'm fully enclosed now in the one location. And I just got the new shop pretty much turnkey again. Just started getting back into it again recently. I took some time off from it for a while to do this house
Yeah.
and a few other things I want to do. But yeah, this summer I'll be I won't say full time, but I'm going to spend this summer. I probably have 6 projects or 7 projects I'd like to finish as far as builds go, and then I'm going to really slow it down and maybe just do one once in a while,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
And I'm going to start exploring some other things, and
Yeah.
I'm trying to really enjoy life now, and trying to take care of myself physically. Um, my daughter's 27 now. I'm hoping soon she gets married and decides to have children.
Yeah.
Thinking about other things in life now, spending time with my girlfriend,
Yeah.
doing a little trip with her, things like that.
Yeah. So you
Um,
mentioned your body. How is your body faring up after the years in the ring?
Actually, pretty good. Um, I'm not as heavy as I live around the 255 to 265 mark now. I have to do cardio now. But I do go to I don't lift weights for to gain size anymore or anything like that. I guess we realize as we get older, the bigger we are, the harder it is on our organs, right? So I'm I eat healthy, probably 95% of the time. This week I'm in New England, so I'm eating all the old stuff that I never, because in San Diego we have great Mexican, but we don't have great Italian food.
That's true.
So like my girlfriend and I went out, had a great dinner last night. I've been going to all my favorite places. I'm meeting up with my buddies. Like I said, we're at Mohegan Sun tonight. We're gonna hang out, have dinner. Headed to New York tomorrow. But yeah, I just try to eat healthy. I go to the gym. I'm not a crazy gym rat, but I go pretty much 5 days a week, and I lift, for strength, but also for mobility.
Yeah.
We've learned. I'm sure I can tell you work out. So we've learned now as we get older, right, that we don't need to lift heavy. um,
Yeah. That's
we need
true.
to, right?
Yeah, it's true. We can't, I'm starting to hit certain walls now where I'm like, okay, yeah, that's starting to hurt now. I can't push. The joints aren't growing. They don't grow like the muscles. So
Exactly.
I feel it as I'm sitting right here. I've got a pain in my neck, from years where yeah, behind the neck. We're doing behind the neck presses and behind the neck pull downs when I was 22. Yeah, because I did at one point, and we talked off camera when we were talking on the phone. I did at one point want to be a pro wrestler. I did go to,
Sure.
yeah, I went to wrestling school, UPW with Rick Bassman in El Segundo,
Sure.
California. Yeah, I went out there in 2002 when you were doing Billy and Chuck, and then spoke to Jesse. I met Jesse probably 6, 7 years ago, and there was a slight inclination that maybe I could do like a Rico and come out a little bit later in life, but got back in the ring and like, nah, the neck is it's not going to allow
Yeah.
me,
Yeah.
not going to allow me
It's
to.
a brutal business. It's a brutal business for the body.
Yeah,
It really is.
yeah.
But yeah, so now lightweight,
Mhm.
uh, I spend probably a good 20 minutes warming up,
Okay.
especially the shoulders before I get started. And then, yeah, dynamic stuff, lightweight, good squeezes. And then I get on the bike.
Mhm.
I love bikes. I get on the bike and then do my cardio. I live in a rural area in San Diego, so I like to walk my dog. There was a period when I was doing a little more hiking than I am now, but go through stages with that. Um, yeah, trying just trying to be healthy, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to ask you, Chuck, if you got the platform to talk to whoever's going to see this video, what would your words of wisdom be now that you've worn so many different hats, perhaps specifically to someone who may be inspired to be a pro wrestler, and then to somebody just in life, what would your words of wisdom be, Chuck?
Okay. It's probably going to take a minute, but I guess we can start in the wrestling business, and I don't want to doubt the wrestling business has been very good to me. I've met a lot of wonderful people in the wrestling business. Wrestlers themselves are some of the most amazing people. Their work ethic is unparalleled. Um, so I want to start by saying that wrestling is one of those businesses where the guys would be willing to work, and I've said this before, for regular pay cuts on a regular basis, um, just to be part of the business. No health insurance, no guarantees on how, even though these contracts are guaranteed, there's no guarantees on these contracts. No guarantees on longevity, high risk. Um, these guys will continue to do it. So I have to give my hats off to the guys who actually do become pro wrestlers and do it. But that being said, in today's world today, there's so much opportunity now because of the internet and what's available out there, and the fact that a lot of people don't want to work anymore, especially in the trades, law enforcement, you name it. There's a lot of opportunity out there. So I wouldn't, just because of the risks of wrestling and the lack of guarantees, and just let's be straight, the business doesn't treat their people well. I'm hoping it gets better as time goes on, but for the most part, you can be here today, gone tomorrow. There's no benefits, there's no health insurance, there's no retirement, there's none of that. I mean, these guys are still paying for their rental cars and their hotel rooms on the road. So there's a lot of corporate out there. There's a lot of mom and pop business owners. There's a lot of government business, government business, that people who put the same effort into that pro wrestling, and that's that person, those guys who are willing to work and travel and live three guys in a rental car in a room and not have benefits. Those people in the corporate world, in the government world, in the trades world, they would love to have those people. And they'll give them the benefits. They'll give them the retirement. They'll give them time off. They'll give them sick leave. All the stuff that the wrestling business doesn't give you. If you continue to keep that attitude and that work ethic, you may not have the skill. They'll train you too. They'll pay to train you. So I highly encourage young people, especially. Yes, if wrestling's your passion, maybe it's something you should explore. But before you get too old, because it happens quick, you can be trying to break in for 10 years, 15 years. You can waste a lot of critical time in your life where you could be learning a trade, an education, get in with a government job or a corporate job where you're already accumulating retirement. So I would suggest that be planned.
Okay.
Or don't forget about it. Do it early. I don't know. I might be sounding like I know everything. I don't. This is just through trial and error. I had no.
Yeah.
This is just learning the hard way.
Yeah. Well, you've definitely.
So, as far as the wrestling business goes, that. But as far as life, you have to become comfortable with being uncomfortable if you're going to grow as a person. If you stay comfortable, you don't leave your hometown, you don't decide to go to college out of state just for that experience. You don't decide to maybe join the military for 4 years, travel the world. If you don't step outside your box and become comfortable and realize that it's okay to have the fear, right? The fear of the unknown. What's going to happen tomorrow? What's going to happen when I go here and try out for this job? What happens if I don't make it through this boot camp or this police academy or whatever it is? If you don't go out there and try it, you're never going to know, and you're not going to grow. There's no need for the body to grow mentally or physically or spiritually unless you present it with challenge. So that's the big one for me, what I've learned. And I've learned that again through trial and error and being young and being naive at the time. So now that I'm always trying to step out of the box and learn and challenge myself to something.
Yeah.
You're not going to lose anything. At the end of the day, you might just gain some wonderful friends.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But also you maybe become part of something bigger. So
Yeah.
that's my 2 cents. I hope I didn't bore you with that.
Absolutely not. You're an inspiration. That's, like I said, Chuck, that's one of the reasons I created this show, because I really wanted it to be, victoire and French, it means victory. So I wanted
Sure.
to share victories of people like yourself with the audience so that they can learn, they can become encouraged and inspired. It's not all about pro wrestling and everything else. It's about many
Right.
other variables. I really want to get deeper with the guests that I have on. So I thank you for that because I know it will help somebody somewhere. Even if it
Yeah,
just
no,
one person, it'll help them.
yeah, and I truly appreciate you giving me the platform, the opportunity to speak about that and share that. I appreciate it. Makes me feel good to be able to share that. So thank you.
Yeah, well, we thank you, Chuck. So I'll chat with you off camera, but I'll say goodbye to our viewers now. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Victoire with our guest, Chuck Palumbo. Thank you, Chuck.
Thank you guys very much for watching. I appreciate it. I'm always blessed.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of Victoire. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like our videos. If you would like to get in contact, please do so using the email address in the description of the video below. Until next time, victor what you must victor in your life. Victoire.